I can't believe you actually did this. My voice came out strangled, as if the air itself refused to carry my words. It was the morning of graduation. The sun spilled through the sheer curtains of my bedroom in Portland, Oregon, illuminating the empty hangar where my navy blue robe had hung the night before. My name, Rachel Carter, age 24, was embroidered in delicate gold letters on the inside seam. I turned, and there she stood in the doorway, Megan, my cousin, wearing my robe like it had always been hers. She smiled, but her eyes flickered with something sharp. "It looked better on me anyway," she said lightly, brushing invisible lint from the sleeve. I pressed my palm to my chest, feeling my heartbeat trip over itself. All those years of work, of hope, she'd stolen it in a single, petty move. But in that moment, something inside me settled. I wasn't going to beg her.
Not today.
My name is Rachel Carter, and if you told me 4 years ago that my own cousin would be the person to try to humiliate me on the most important day of my life, I wouldn't have believed you. Back then, I was too busy proving everyone wrong to notice the envy simmering in her eyes. I grew up in a small, two-bedroom house on the east side of Portland, Oregon. My mom, Susan, worked 12-hour shifts as a nurse, and my dad left when I was 10. Money was tight. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, the yellow formica peeling up at the corners, helping Mom sort through the bills while she rubbed her temples. Even as a kid, I understood we were one emergency away from losing everything. College felt like the farthest thing in the world. But when I was 15, my grandmother Evelyn moved in with us. She brought the scent of lavender soap and the steady belief that I was meant for something more. She'd been a teacher her whole life, and she kept a row of well-worn books in her bedroom. Dickens, Bronte, Baldwin. Every night, I'd sneak in after dinner, and we'd read together until my eyelids drooped. "Education is your armor, Rachel," she told me once, her fingers tracing the gold chain around her neck. "No one can steal that from you." I carried that line in my heart through every part-time job, every late-night study session. By the time I graduated high school, I'd saved enough in my battered coffee tin to cover a semester's tuition. I worked mornings as a barista, afternoons in the library, and weekends cleaning offices with Mom. Megan, on the other hand, had always been different. She was my aunt's daughter, 2 years older, with her father's money and her mother's vanity. She drove a silver convertible and wore designer jeans while I rotated 3 pairs of thrift store pants. We shared holidays, birthdays, and sometimes, to my dismay, classes. At family gatherings, Megan liked to brag about her plans: international business, MBA programs, internships with companies I'd only ever read about online. She'd toss her blonde hair over her shoulder, looking at me like I was something sticky she'd stepped in. But I never let it get to me. Not out loud. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was doing this for me, not for her. Still, I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting. There was one Thanksgiving, the year before my grandmother passed away, when Megan cornered me in the kitchen. I was washing dishes while she scrolled on her phone. "You know you'll never actually get out of here, right?" she said, her voice casual, like she was mentioning the weather. "Some people just aren't meant to do big things." I didn't answer. I just scrubbed harder at the casserole dish until my knuckles were raw. The day I got my acceptance letter to Portland State University, I sat on the porch steps and cried so hard I thought my ribs would crack. My grandmother sat beside me, holding my hand. "You did this," she whispered. "No one else." For years went by faster than I could have imagined. Every semester felt like another mountain to climb. I took 20 credits while working full-time. There were nights I'd fall asleep in the library, waking up to the smell of stale coffee and highlighters. I missed birthdays, weddings, even my own mother's 50th, because I couldn't afford to slow down. But I did it. I earned every last credit. I scraped together enough money to order the cap and gown, navy blue with the university's crest stitched on the chest, and the stole embroidered with first-generation graduate. That robe meant more to me than any diploma ever could. It was proof I'd survived, that I'd honored my grandmother's faith. When the box arrived, I opened it in my small apartment, running my fingers over the soft fabric, imagining how it would feel on my shoulders when I walked across the stage. Even tried it on in front of my bathroom mirror, taking a photo to send to Mom. That photo was the last thing my grandmother saw before she passed away 2 months before graduation. I printed it out and tucked it into the frame on her nightstand in the hospice. So when I woke up this morning to find it gone, something inside me broke and then reformed. Harder, clearer. I knew exactly who had taken it. And I knew she'd done it because she couldn't stand to watch me win. In that moment, all the years of quiet endurance and swallowed pride crystallized into something sharp and focused. Megan thought she was the only one who could plan, who could strategize. She had no idea who she was dealing with. Because while she was busy scheming, I'd been working, saving, and making sure I had options. I thought about every time she'd laughed behind my back, every time she'd called me charity case when she thought I couldn't hear. I remembered my grandmother's voice. No one can steal what you've earned. She was right. Even if Megan thought she'd won by taking my robe, I had already taken something she valued even more. And before the day was over, she was going to find that out. After Megan walked away, leaving me standing in my own doorway, I sat on the edge of my bed and let the silence settle over me like a heavy quilt. My hands were still trembling, but my mind was already cataloging everything I had prepared for this moment. Every receipt, every backup plan, every quiet countermeasure she didn't know existed. I reached for my phone and scrolled to the email confirmation from 4 weeks earlier, the one with her name printed across the top. Order confirmation, cap and gown rental for Megan Dalton. Shipping address, Rachel Carter, 1729 Northeast Fremont Street, Apartment 4. Because while Megan had been too self-absorbed to pay attention, she'd left her laptop logged in at a family dinner last month. I remembered glancing at the open browser tab. Graduation cap and gown, Portland State University. Rental deadline April 30th. It had taken less than 5 minutes to order her set in my name, paid for with the prepaid Visa card I'd been gifted by my boss as a holiday bonus. And I'd had it shipped to my apartment, so I could ensure she wouldn't have a backup if she tried to pull something like this. I set my phone down carefully on the bedspread, feeling an eerie calm spread through my chest. It wasn't revenge. Not exactly. It was insurance. When I stepped out onto the porch, Megan's silver convertible was still idling in the driveway, exhaust curling into the morning air. She was in the driver's seat, adjusting the mirror and checking her hair. She didn't look up as I walked around to the passenger side and tapped on the glass. "Get in," she called, her voice sugary sweet. "We don't want to be late." I studied her for a long moment, wondering if she even believed her own performance anymore. Then I opened the door and climbed in, folding my hands in my lap as she pulled out onto the road. The campus was alive when we arrived, a tide of blue and white robes streaming across the quad. I caught sight of my classmates, hugging their families and taking photos beneath the banners that read, "Congratulations, class of 2025. Megan parked near the auditorium and turned to me with a smirk. "Try not to embarrass yourself today," she said lightly, like she was offering me a favor. I didn't answer. I just opened the glove box and pulled out the thick, white envelope I'd tucked there the night before. The weight of it felt satisfying in my hand. "What's that?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. "Something you're going to want to see," I said. Her smile flickered. I stepped out of the car, the envelope held against my chest like a shield, and started walking toward the check-in tables where the staff was handing out name cards. Megan trailed behind me, calling my name. "Rachel, what are you doing?" I stopped in front of the registrar, a kind-looking woman in her 50s named Linda, who had helped me process my graduation paperwork 2 months earlier. "Hi, Linda," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to verify something." Linda glanced from me to Megan and back again, her eyebrows lifting slightly. "Of course. How can I help?" I held out the envelope. "I'd like to confirm the rental records for the cap and gown issued to Megan Dalton." Megan's face went pale. "You're kidding me." Linda opened the envelope, pulling out the printed confirmation and the signed receipt with Megan's name. She read them carefully before looking up. "Miss Dalton, it appears this order was placed by Ms. Carter," she said gently. "And the rental was assigned to her billing information." Megan's mouth opened, then closed. She looked like she'd swallowed a mouthful of glass. You set me up, she hissed. I met her gaze, feeling the last of my fear drain away. No, I said quietly. I protected myself. Around us, the line was moving forward, students stepping up to collect their name cards. Linda glanced apologetically at Megan. If you don't have your own rental confirmation, I'm afraid we can't issue you a replacement. But I'm already wearing it. Megan sputtered, clutching the robe like it was her lifeline. Linda sighed. Then you'll need to resolve this between yourselves. I turned slightly, so only Megan could hear me. You wanted to humiliate me, I whispered. But you forgot something important. She blinked, her mascara already smudging beneath her eyes. I've spent my entire life planning for the worst, I said. You've spent yours assuming nothing would ever go wrong for you. For the first time since I'd known her, Megan didn't have a comeback. I reached into my tote bag and pulled out the second envelope, thinner than the first. This is your copy, I said, pressing it into her trembling hands. She looked down at it as if it might explode. What is it? The bill, I said. For the cap and gown you're wearing. Since you decided to take mine without asking, I decided to make sure you had your own, whether you knew it or not. Her hand fluttered to her mouth. You. But I didn't wait for her to finish. I stepped up to the table and signed my own name card, my hand perfectly steady. Linda smiled at me, her eyes warm. Congratulations, Rachel. I swallowed the knot in my throat and nodded. Thank you. Behind me, Megan's voice rose, shrill and desperate. This is insane. She planned this. I turned back one last time, letting her see the calm on my face. Yes, I said. I did. And it felt better than I'd ever imagined. As I walked away from the check-in table, the morning sunlight glinting off the auditorium's tall glass windows, I felt the strangest combination of relief and dread. Relief that I had finally faced Megan without shrinking. Dread because I knew this wasn't over. Not with her. I made my way around the back of the auditorium, where rows of graduates waited in alphabetical lines. My classmates were hugging, laughing, posing for pictures in their robes and caps. All around me was a celebration I'd earned, but could barely feel through the buzzing tension in my chest. I glanced down at my phone, half expecting a barrage of texts from Megan. But there was nothing. A familiar voice called my name, breaking through my thoughts. Rachel. I turned to see Lisa, my closest friend from the education program, hurrying toward me. Her curly auburn hair was pinned up under her cap, her cheeks flushed with excitement. She threw her arms around me in a tight hug. Can you believe we made it? She laughed, pulling back to look at me. I tried to smile. Barely. She studied my face, her smile fading. What happened? Before I could answer, Megan appeared behind us, the robe still wrapped around her like a shield. She looked at Lisa, then at me, her lips pressed into a thin line. Give me the receipt, she demanded, her voice low and shaking. I took a breath. I already gave you your copy. I'm not talking about that, she snapped. I want the receipt for your robe. The one you said I stole. I tilted my head. Why? Because, she said, her voice rising, I'm going to prove you're lying. Lisa stepped between us, her expression incredulous. Megan, what is wrong with you? She planned this. Megan barked, pointing a trembling finger at me. She's trying to make me look like a thief, like some pathetic wannabe. You did steal it, I interrupted, my voice quiet. You came into my apartment, took it off the hanger, and drove away. You knew what you were doing. People were beginning to stare. I saw 2 faculty members glance our way, whispering to each other. Megan followed my gaze, her face flushing deep red. You always play the victim, she spat. You act like you're so much better, like you deserve everything you have. I do, I said. My voice didn't shake this time. I worked for it. All of it. Something snapped in her eyes. You think you're the only one who worked hard? She shouted. You think I didn't have to fight for anything? That I didn't have to prove myself? My parents never thought I was good enough either. Her voice broke on the last word, and for a split second, I saw the crack in her armor. But it was buried beneath so many layers of bitterness, I knew it didn't matter. Lisa looked between us, her eyes wide. Megan, you're embarrassing yourself. Megan's gaze darted to her, then back to me. Stay out of this, she hissed. Lisa squared her shoulders.
No.
I'm tired of watching you treat her like garbage. I felt something shift. Lisa had always been polite to Megan at family gatherings, always careful not to get involved. But now she stepped closer to me, her voice steady. You don't get to do this anymore, she said. You don't get to tear her down just because you can't stand to see her succeed. Megan opened her mouth, but no words came out. Rachel, Lisa said, turning to me, come on. Let's go check in with the department chair. He's been looking for you. I hesitated, watching Megan's face crumple, her hand curling around the fabric of the robe. For a moment, I wondered if I should say something, offer her some piece of the grace I'd been holding onto all these years. But nothing came. We left her standing there, trembling, as we joined the line of graduates moving toward the staging area. My heart was hammering so hard I felt dizzy, but I forced myself to take slow breaths. That was intense, Lisa murmured as we walked. I nodded. It's been building up for a long time. Lisa squeezed my arm. You handled it better than I would have. I don't know, I said softly. It doesn't feel like winning. But when we reached the staging area, the program director greeted me with a warm smile. Rachel Carter, he said, checking my name off the list. Congratulations. We're so proud of you. For the first time all day, I felt the warmth of that pride sink in past my defenses. Thank you, I whispered. We moved into a small anteroom where faculty were pinning hoods and straightening tassels. I stood by the window, watching families gather outside. Megan's parents were there, her mother waving her phone around as she searched the crowd. I wondered if she was looking for Megan or just trying to document the perfect photo op. Lisa touched my shoulder. Do you want me to stand with you during the procession? I nodded, too choked up to speak. Somewhere deep in my pocket, my phone buzzed. A new text from Megan. You think this is over? It's not. I swallowed, my throat tight.
She still didn't get it.
I didn't need her approval anymore. I didn't need her to see me as worthy. I already was. The ceremony began just before noon. A breeze swept over the outdoor stage, fluttering the blue and white banners that lined the railings. Rows of folding chairs stretched across the lawn, every seat occupied by family, friends, and mentors. I took my place in line, the cap in my hand feeling heavier than I expected. As we waited for the processional music to start, Lisa turned to me, her eyes shining under her mortarboard. You ready? She whispered. I nodded, more than I thought I'd be. The line moved slowly, and I felt each step settle something in my chest. Every sleepless night. Every time I'd wondered if I was kidding myself thinking I deserved to be here. Every hour I'd worked when it would have been easier to quit. It all coalesced into a calm I hadn't felt in years. When I reached the stairs to the stage, I looked up at the lectern where the dean was waiting, smiling at each graduate as they approached. My heart stuttered when I thought about Megan, somewhere behind me, still wearing the robe she'd stolen, still clinging to whatever story she'd built in her head about who I was. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I climbed the stairs, my cap under my arm. As I crossed the platform, applause broke out, and for a moment, I almost didn't recognize that it was for me. I looked out into the crowd and saw my mom, her hands cupped around her mouth as she cheered. Beside her was my aunt, her face pale, eyes darting from me to the space where Megan should have been. The dean extended his hand. Rachel Carter, he said warmly. Congratulations. You did it. Thank you. I managed, my voice thick. He handed me the rolled certificate, bound with a navy ribbon. My fingers closed around it, and I thought of my grandmother, her voice in my head, steady and sure. Education is your armor. As I moved off the stage, Lisa fell into step beside me, her hand slipping into mine. You okay? She murmured. I nodded. I think I'm better than okay. The graduates gathered in clusters around the refreshment tables. A few professors stopped to shake my hand and offer their congratulations. One of them, Dr. Nguyen, smiled at me kindly. You're going to do great things, Rachel, she said. I hope you know that. I swallowed. I'm starting to. Lisa leaned in. There's someone coming over. I turned and saw Megan weaving through the crowd, her eyes locked on me. Her robe hung awkwardly from her shoulders, the hem stained with grass. For the first time all day, she looked small, like someone who wasn't sure what to do now that her old tactics had failed. She stopped a few feet away, her gaze flicking between me and Lisa. I don't expect you to forgive me, she began, her voice hoarse. I don't know why I did it. I was angry and jealous, and I thought if I could take something from you, it would make me feel less worthless. I didn't say anything right away. I felt Lisa's hand tense in mine, but I didn't look away from Megan. You can keep the robe, I said quietly, if it matters that much to you. Her eyes filled with tears. It doesn't. Not really. Then why? She shook her head, a tear slipping down her cheek. Because I couldn't stand watching you become everything I knew I never would. The words landed between us, raw and heavy. For a moment, I remembered the girl she'd been before she learned how to wound people, before the competition, the jealousy, the bitterness. A girl who just wanted to matter. I took a slow breath. You could still be something more, I said. You don't have to keep doing this. Megan looked down, wiping her cheek. I don't know how. You start by deciding to stop hurting people who didn't do anything to you. She met my eyes, and something in her expression softened. Just a little. I'm sorry, she whispered. I believed her. But I also knew an apology didn't erase what she'd done. That's a start, I said. Lisa cleared her throat gently. Do you want to take a picture with us, Rachel? I hesitated.
Yeah.
I do. Megan stepped back as Lisa pulled me toward the edge of the lawn where the official photographers were taking portraits. As we waited our turn, I glanced over my shoulder and saw Megan standing alone, her robe fluttering around her ankles. She didn't look victorious anymore. She looked tired. When it was my turn, I stepped up to the blue backdrop, holding my diploma in front of me. The photographer lifted his camera, and I squared my shoulders. Ready? He asked. I thought of everything it had taken to get here. Every small betrayal, every moment of doubt, every hour I'd spent proving, to myself more than anyone, that I belonged. Yes, I said. The flash went off, capturing the moment I chose not to let her win. Afterward, Lisa and I walked to the courtyard where tables were set up with snacks and punch. My mom found us there, her eyes red from crying. I'm so proud of you, she whispered as she hugged me. Grandma would be too, I said, my voice breaking. We stood there a long time, the three of us, as the crowd thinned and the sun began to sink behind the buildings. A faculty member came over to ask if I'd thought about applying for the graduate teaching program. I told her I'd been considering it. She handed me a brochure. You have a lot to offer, she said. Don't let anyone make you feel small. I looked past her to where Megan was talking to her parents. Her shoulders were slumped, but she wasn't shouting anymore. Maybe she was finally realizing the robe had never been the prize. As the ceremony wound down, Lisa squeezed my arm. You ready to go? I looked around the emptying courtyard. My heart felt lighter. Yeah, I said. I think I am. As we walked toward the parking lot, I felt something in me settle for good. I hadn't just survived her betrayal. I'd proven to myself that no one, not even Megan, could take away what I'd built. I had earned every moment of this day. And for the first time, I let myself believe it. 3 months later, the first crisp days of September settled over Portland like a clean sheet pulled over a rumpled bed. In the early mornings, the air smelled of rain and wood smoke, and the leaves along the sidewalks flared gold and rust. I'd moved into a new apartment on the east side, a tiny studio with tall windows and scuffed hardwood floors. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Every night when I turned the key in the lock, I felt a small thrill of ownership, the proof that I was finally building a life that belonged only to me. The robe and cap were folded neatly in a cedar-lined box at the back of my closet. I hadn't wanted to see them for a while, not after everything that had happened. But last week, I'd opened the box again, and instead of anger, I felt something closer to peace. Megan had texted me twice since graduation. The first message was an apology, longer and more vulnerable than the one she'd spoken in person. The second was shorter, just 4 words. I hope you're well. I hadn't replied. Maybe I would someday. Or maybe some distances are meant to remain. One Saturday afternoon, I met Lisa at a small cafe downtown. She was working on her applications to graduate school, a stack of essays and recommendation letters piled in front of her. You look good, she said, studying me over her latte. Happy. I smiled. I am. We talked for an hour about everything, her plans, my new job as a classroom aide, the possibility of me applying for the graduate teaching program. She leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. You know, she said, most people would have gone scorched earth on Megan after what she did. I sipped my tea. I thought about it, but you didn't. I set my cup down.
No.
Because then she would still be in control. Lisa reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. You're the strongest person I know. Maybe, I said softly. Or maybe I just got tired of letting someone else decide how I felt about myself. The next day, I woke up early and opened my laptop. The graduate program application was still bookmarked, the deadline highlighted in neon yellow on my calendar. For weeks, I'd told myself I wasn't ready, that I needed more time. But the truth was, I was just afraid. Afraid of failing. Afraid of succeeding. Afraid of being seen. I took a deep breath and clicked Start Application. It felt like crossing another threshold, one I hadn't realized I'd been standing at for years. That afternoon, I visited my mother. She'd planted a garden behind her little duplex, rows of sunflowers and tomato plants that grew taller every week. She met me at the door, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Come see, she said, leading me around the side of the house. I followed her down the narrow path, and when we reached the garden, I stopped. A small wooden sign was staked in the soil, painted in my grandmother's careful script. Education is your armor. I crouched beside it, my fingers tracing the letters. For the first time in so long, I felt my throat close with something that wasn't grief or anger, but gratitude. She'd be so proud of you, my mother said quietly. I know, I whispered. I stood and hugged her, the sun warm on my shoulders. When I drove home, I rolled down the windows and let the early autumn air spill into the car. At a red light, I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a heartbeat, I imagined I saw my grandmother's face reflected back, smiling. I smiled too. A week later, I got an email from the graduate admissions office. Congratulations, Rachel Carter. You've been accepted to the Portland State Graduate Teaching Program. I read it 3 times before I let myself believe it. The next morning, I carried the cedar box from the closet to the living room. I set it on the floor and lifted the lid. I pulled out the cap first, running my thumb over the smooth fabric. Then the robe, still holding the faint scent of lavender sachets. I stood in the middle of my apartment, the robe draped over my arms, and let myself remember everything it represented. Not the fight with Megan, not the bitterness, but the quiet victories that no one had seen, the late nights in the library, the early mornings brewing coffee, the moments when quitting had seemed easier and I hadn't. I folded the robe again, carefully, and placed it back in the box. Later that evening, I called Lisa. Want to celebrate? She asked immediately. Yeah, I said, smiling. I do. We met at a little restaurant near campus. Over pasta and cheap champagne, she made a toast. To surviving, she said, lifting her glass. To thriving, I corrected. We clinked glasses, and for the first time, I felt that word fit me. When I got home that night, the apartment smelled of eucalyptus and clean laundry. I set my keys on the counter and turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. This was mine. This life I'd built from the wreckage of other people's expectations. I thought about Megan then. I hoped she'd find her own way forward, that she'd stop measuring her worth against mine. But whether she did or not wasn't something I could carry anymore. The next morning, I woke up to bright, golden light spilling across the floor. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and began drafting my lesson plans for the fall. Outside my window, A new day was starting. Clean, unmarked, full of possibility. And for the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged.